Good.
This is CSC 111 class, Introduction to Computer Science. I am Dr. Mrs. Olayemi. I will be taking you CSC 11, which is Introduction to Computer Science. So we are starting with Module 1, which is the definition of computer science, the history and generations of computer. So at the end of this module, learners should be able to define what a computer is, and also should be able to explain the history and different generations of computer. So we are going to start with the definition. Simply, we can define computer as an electronic device. That is the general definition. Computer is an electronic device that is capable of processing data and giving out information. So that is just the simple definition. But the one I have in the lecture notes that you have is a computer can simply be described as a powerful electronic device which has the capability of accepting data. It has the capability of accepting data which is known as the inputs in a prescribed format, the format you want that data to be. You apply a series of arithmetic and logical operation on the data, which is known as the processing, and produce the result, which is known as the information. So you also call information as output. The output will be in a specified format. So let me describe it once again. A computer can simply be described as a powerful electronic device which has the capability of accepting data as input in a prescribed format, applying a series of arithmetic and logical operation on the data, which is known as the processing, and produce the result, which is known as information. Of this operation, which is also known as the output, in a specified format at a very fast speed under the control of a logical sequence of instruction called program. So you have to look at the definitions one after the other. Now looking at, I mentioned three things. A computer can be described as an input, processing, and output. We call it IPO. I for input, P for process, and O for output. I have a pictorial representation here. Input, processing, output. So that is the definition of computer science. Now looking at the data. Data can be defined as a representation of raw facts that needs to be processed to produce information. What do I mean by raw facts? When you say something is raw, something that doesn't have meaning, it doesn't make meaning to you. For example, if I tell you 2, you will be wondering what is wrong with 2? What is the meaning of 2? What does this woman mean by 2? Or if I tell you bag, or I mention Lagos, you don't know what happens to Lagos. You will be wondering, is this woman traveling to Lagos? What is Lagos? What is she doing with Lagos? Now, that is the meaning of raw facts. But if I tell you, I will be traveling to Lagos, that is a complete sentence. That is an information. You get it? But 2, Lagos, 5, they are known as data. So they need to be processed to produce information. So until you process it, you cannot really know the meaning. So it is known as a raw fact. Now, program. A program is a set of instructions that is written in the language of computer. It is used to make the computer perform specific tasks. So it is the program that will now process the data you have input into the computer for you to get an information. Do you get it? Now, looking at information, information can be defined as processed, structured, and meaningful data. Like the example I gave you the other time, when I mentioned Lagos, I mentioned two, I mentioned maybe rice. Now, until I process the information, the data, that is when it will now have meaning to you. I will be traveling to Lagos tomorrow. I want to buy a bag. That is information. It has meaning. Information has meaning. It is meaningful. Now, for another example, the marks that all graduating students obtained in their degree examination constitute data that need to be processed. Until you process your result in CSC 111, maybe you score 70. In CSC 121, you scored 40. Until you process all these results, you can never know your status. Maybe you are on first class or 2-2 or 2-1. So processing of this data can yield meaningful information such as the overall grade point average, that's the GPA. Until all your results are being processed, that is when you can know your GPA. Now, we want to look at the history of computers. The earliest modern computers were developed during the Second World War, which was between 1939 and 1945. How many of you were born then? So these are early computers. They used vacuum tubes. They were very big, were the size of our houses, and they were very expensive as battleships. Unfortunately, they did not have the computational power to erase or use that as common in today's computers. So in 1950s and 1960s, more powerful mainframe computers were equally developed. In 1959, the integrated circuit was developed. This brought about the great reduction in size of computer memory circuits. At this stage, the sizes were reduced somehow. In 1960s, the first computer mouse was developed. In 1971, the Intel 4004 microprocessor was created by Intel Corporation and was originally designed to be the computing and logical processor of calculators and watches. In 1973, Alto, an experimental PC design, was developed. In 1974, the first desktop-sized system specifically designed for personal use was also produced by Micro Instrumental Telemetry System. In 1977, Tandy Corporation, that is Radio Shack, introduced a PC model which combined two attractive features. And what are the attractive features? A keyboard and a display terminal using a cathode ray tube. That is our screen. In 1981, IBM introduced its own microcomputer model. In 1983, Apple introduced the Lisa, a graphical user interface system. So these are the histories of computer. You will see more of this history in your lecture notes. Now let's look at the internet. The internet was developed for government and academic use in 1960s and 1970s. The World Wide Web was developed in the late 1980s. That's WWW. You always hear of that. The ability to access the internet and the growing World Wide Web greatly enhanced the usefulness of the PC, giving it enormous potential, educational, commercial, and entertainment value. Browsers were designed to make the internet and the World Wide Web more user-friendly. They were designed in a friendly way, just as the graphical user interface makes using PC much simpler and much interesting. In 1974, Netscape became the first browser Microsoft became the first browser. Microsoft came out with the Internet Explorer in 1995. Now let's quickly look at the generations of computer. And this generation of computers is divided into 5 generations, 5 stages. We have the first generation, the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth generation. So we are going to start with the first generation, which started in 1946 to 1959. So in this generation, vacuum tubes were used. We also call it valves, and they were used. And the computers of these generations were ENIAC. What is ENIAC? ENIAC, Electronic Numerical Integrator and Calculator. EDSAC2, Electronic Delay Storage Automatic Calculator. We have EDVAC, Electronic Discrete Variable Automatic Computer, and UNIVAC. So all these were the first generation of computers. Now, what are the features, the characteristics? They were physically very large in size. They contained vacuum tubes. They have limited memory. Unlike the computers we have now that you can store so many things, you can store graphics, your video, and all sorts of. So these ones, they have limited memory. They occupy more space. They consume more power with limited performance. They use punch cards and paper tapes. So they make use of magnetic tape as their secondary memory. They have slow processing speed. Their speed is in milliseconds, and they are very, very expensive. They are very, very expensive. Now let's quickly look at the second generation of computer, which was between 1959 to 1965. In this generation, that is second generation of computers, they make use of transistors. Examples of this generation, of this second generation computers are IBM 1400 series, IBM 7000 series, and others. You will see other examples in your lecture notes. And what are the features? They have reduced in physical size compared to the first generation of computers. They make use of transistors instead of vacuum tubes. You know, we mentioned vacuum tubes in the first generation, but in this generation now, this second generation, make use of transistors. They have larger memory, larger than the first generation of computer. They occupy less space. They are a little bit cheaper than the first generation of computers. They have increased reliability. They have less power consumption, and they have better performance when we compare it to the first generation of computer. They use magnetic tapes and magnetic disc as their secondary memory. So these are the features of second generation computers. The third generation computer started between 1965 to 1970. So in this generation of computers, integrated circuits were used. The mainframe computers like IBM 260, DEC 10, ICL 1900, that is 1900, and 2900 series were developed. The features are they have really reduced in size compared to first and second generation. Their physical size has reduced. Their technology make use of integrated circuits instead of transistors. They have higher speed of computation. The speeds are now in nanoseconds. They have increased in reliability. Then there is mass storage devices with random access capability, and the prices are less than the first and second generation. That is, they are cheaper than the second generation of computers. Now looking at the fourth generation, they make use of very large scale integrated circuits. That is for their technology. Very large, larger than the third generation. And they make use of microprocessors such as personal computers. Now, in the design point of view, when we look at it in the design point of view, it has increased in input and output capability. There is greater system reliability now in this generation. Technology used was very large scale integrated circuits, that is tens of thousands of transistors can be placed in a single chip now. There is emergence of personal computers. Semiconductor memory chips were used as the main memory. Secondary memory was composed of hard disks. We now have floppy disk. Magnetic tapes were used for backup memory. Then there is less power consumption now. Also there is high performance, and the prices are now cheaper than the previous generation of computer. Now when we look at it in the functional point of view, more powerful languages are being used now. Then there is multi-programming and multi-processing for operating system. So looking at the generation of computers, the 5th generation of computer, which was around 1990s. The 5th generation computing devices was based on artificial intelligence. Now when we talk of artificial intelligence, this is a generation where we make machine to perform like human beings. Artificial intelligence are still in developing. Things are still moving on. Technology is still advancing. Though there are some applications such as voice recognition that are being used today, the use of parallel processing and superconductors is helping to make artificial intelligence a reality. You know the things that is happening in our environment now, it is because of artificial intelligence. There is evolution. So in the 5th generation, there is evolution of data flow architecture and functional languages. There is development of expert system, introduction of ultra large scale integration, technology. Intel Pentium 4 processing contain 55 million transistors, millions of components on a single IC chip. There is a memory chips up to 1 gigabyte, hard disk drives up to 180 gigabytes, and even more. There is storage technology advancement, large main memory and disk. You know all the storage devices you now make use of. And there is visual library, classroom, multimedia application and all that, even the one we are using now. So there is new operating system in this 5th generation. We have Windows 95, 98, we have Linux and all that. So you can see that the technology is seriously advancing. So please, I want you to go through the lecture notes given to you, and if you have questions, you can always send your questions to me. So from 1st to 5th generation, computers become smaller, lighter, cheaper, more efficient and more reliable. You now have laptop, you have your phones that can serve as your computer system. So we have self-assessment questions. So please try to answer all these questions and send them to me. Thank you and God bless you.